You're listening to Margins and Meaning with John Wilson. Margins and Meaning accepts zero responsibility for remakes, delaminations, fractures, open contacts, poor scans, missing opposings, unindexed bites, or any case that miraculously hits your inbox without a requested shade. Anything I say on this show is just my opinion. It's not gospel. It's not CE. It's not legal advice, and it definitely may induce emotional damage. Please, if you choose to listen to anything that was discussed here today, you do so at your own risk, preferably with a full night's sleep, sharp burrs, a clinician who actually realized there is, in fact, more shades in the shade guide than A2. Listen at your own risk. Thank you. Welcome back to Margins and Meaning. I'm John Wilson, and this is episode 9. I'm so glad you're here. I took a little time, not because I ran out of things to say, but because I wanted to come back with clarity. And if you listen to episode 8, you already know what I mean. There's a point when you realize that the weight doesn't magically disappear. You just learn what it is that you're actually carrying, and you learn why you're still willing to carry it. So today, it's not me trying to reinvent the show. Today, it's like me putting a line under the first 8 episodes and saying, okay, that mattered. That shaped me. That's my truth. And now we move forward with intention. You know, those first 8 episodes were the record, my record, describing the origin of my path in this great industry. The garage years, the furnace years, the seasons where fear was louder than the facts, the seasons where you say yes because you just don't know how to say no yet, the seasons where you confuse being busy with being built, the seasons where you keep the lights on and you call it a success, and then somehow you look up and realize you built something that can eat you alive if you don't learn to lead it. And somewhere in that timeline, something starts to take shape. Not a technique, not a piece of equipment, not a new material. Certainly not a workflow on a screen, but something really deeper than that. A standard. Because if you don't define your standard, the day defines it for you. The loudest person in the room defines it for you. The most rushed appointment defines it for you as well. The case with the missing information defines it. The assistant who doesn't care defines it. The schedule defines it for you. The fear defines it for you. Then you wake up one day and you realize you've been operating on someone else's expectations while it's your name that's taken the hit. This episode is about standards in real life, not standards on a poster or standards that sound good in a meeting, standards that cost you something, standards that protect outcomes, standards that protect relationships, standards that maybe protect your peace. And I want to do something a little different starting today. From here forward, I'm going to go ahead and continue to tell the stories in the John Wilson way. I'm still going to talk like a technician, but because that's really who I am. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try very hard to go a bit deeper. I'm going to get more practical. One story, one principle, one tool you can use. Every single episode, that's my goal. Because good outcomes aren't just accidental, they're repeatable. And repeatability only shows up when the standards are real. And guys, it's time for me to anchor back to something that I said back in episode 1 because it's been quietly sitting underneath this entire series. I think I said it like this: your outcome follows intention, and intention follows understanding. And you know, that quote is not something I just made up for this microphone. This is a lesson I paid for in real time with real consequences over and over again. And if you take nothing else from today, take this. Standards are how you protect understanding. Standards are how you stop guessing. Standards are how you stop gambling your name on incomplete information. Okay, let's get into the case files. Hey guys, let's get into case file number one. It's funny now, but I can tell you back in the moment, it certainly wasn't. Back in the day, I told this story in a prior episode, but let's go into it a little bit deeper because it has meaning. I was taking these classes, these continuing education classes. This one was on aesthetic functional arrangements for dentures utilizing colorized waxing. And if you've ever done colorized waxing, you already know it's not just building a try-in, it's actually auditioning the case. It's building a promise and showing the patient really what's coming. It's also showing the doctor what's possible. It takes time and attention, but I can tell you in my lab, it was absolutely a game changer. It also teaches you one of those things that teaches your hands what digital can't teach your hands. You see, wax teaches you to see deeper. It teaches you to feel. It teaches you to build form with intention. It forces you to slow down and ask, what are you actually trying to create here? At that time in my life, I wanted to impress people, not in a ego way, but maybe in that young technician way where you're trying to earn your place. You're trying to prove you belong. You're trying to show a new client that's choosing you wasn't a mistake. So I got this case in. It's an upper and lower. It's a newer doctor. I worked with him a little bit, but not enough to be comfortable. He was one of those clinicians that actually really cared. And I say that in a really definitive tone because not every client puts the level of detail in that's not really necessary for excellence. But he was one of those guys. He certainly wasn't giving less and asking for more. He was just the opposite. He was absolutely giving everything that I could ask for. So when you find a young doctor like that, it kind of wakes up something in you. Even in those younger years, all I wanted to be is that guy that was going to match his effort. Really give him the understanding that I was owning that case. So the case comes in. I remember opening that box and seeing the records. Guys, they weren't perfect. And truthfully, they rarely are. But there was effort in them. You can see it. There was thought. There was attempt to communicate in a deeper manner, and I really respected that. So my goal was to take this case to the next level. Of course, we're working with these cases and putting deep thought into it, but this one, I took it just to a little bit higher level. I built this arrangement to fit the face, not just the ridge, and I did the kind of characterization that I'd learned in this class. It didn't scream for attention, but it actually makes those teeth look alive. And you know how little things can make big differences. I added the colorization to the wax in such a unique manner that it actually brought it alive. It didn't look fake. I didn't overdo it. I did the thing that takes longer because, well, I cared. When I was done, I sat back and I felt proud. And you know what, guys? That pride is dangerous, by the way. Pride is not arrogance, but sometimes pride is the first time you finally see yourself as capable. But pride still needs a leash, guys. You got to reel it in sometimes because pride can make you blind to what the other person is actually experiencing. So I packed up that try-in like it was a gift. I put it in the box. It looked amazing. Sent it out. I expected a quick call back with excitement because in my head, that was what a good try-in actually should have. A few days go by, I didn't hear anything, but, I was just telling myself that maybe sometimes that silence just means it went fine. But sometimes that silence is the calm before the storm. And then it happens. That phone rings, the assistant says, "Hey, doctor wants to talk to you." So I pick up the phone, the doctor starts yelling loud and angry and super frustrated, that kind of yelling that makes you instantly scan your memory, You feel the heat on the back of your neck and you're starting to reply these steps in your head like it's some sort of film trying to find the mistake. And in that moment, your mind does not go to the facts. Your mind goes to the fear. It writes stories. It predicts disasters. It starts planning on how you're going to defend yourself. You see, guys, I didn't interrupt him. I let him get it all out. Because most of the time, when somebody's yelling, the yelling isn't the point. The embarrassment is the point. The panic is the point. The feeling of exposure is the point. And when he finally takes a breath, I say calmly, Doctor walked me through what happened. He tells me the assistant handed the try-in to the patient put it in, the patient loved it, and the patient walked out of the operatory with it. A wax try-in, walking out the front door. Now the doctor's picturing the wax in the hot car, wax distorting, wax breaking, wax getting chewed through. He's thinking about optics. He's thinking about the schedule. He's thinking about the patient coming back upset. He's thinking about everything at once. And you know what happens next. That embarrassment looks for a target because now he's recognizing what happened. So the fear he aims at me, I let it land. I let him finish. I say calmly, "Doctor, you know that was a wax try-in." And of course, the silence hits him, and I can feel the moment his brain catches up to reality. He knows, of course. He knows. But in the panic, he forgot. In the speed of the day, he forgot. Then he bursts out fast like he's trying to rescue himself from the silence. "John, I told you, don't make the try-ins look this good." And my first internal reaction was to scoff, because what do you want me to do? Make bad dentistry on purpose? That's not who I am. That's not who we are. That's not the trade I'm proud to be a part of. But I didn't say that. Because a standard just isn't what you make it. A standard is how you respond when things get tough or weird. My quick wit kicked in and I said, "Doctor, I absolutely will make everything look much, much worse." And of course he laughed, and then that laugh took the pressure off. And once that pressure broke, the truth could really enter the room. We reset, we moved forward, the case got back on track. But what that story really taught me wasn't about try-ins. It taught me about restraint. So often in the past, when an angry person would call, I would respond with anger, trying to defend myself. You see, this time it taught me something different. I wasn't going to lower my standard, but I was going to control my expression of it all. It taught me that the relationship matters more than being right in the moment. It taught me that when people are cornered by embarrassment, they say just ridiculously outlandish things. They say things they really don't mean. They say things to kind of protect themselves. How you respond in that moment determines whether trust survives. I said that before, but it really is powerful. That was maybe the earliest version of ownership. That was the early version of the standard. The standard was not the wax. The standard was in the response. Now let's go one level deeper. Here is case file number 2, where the standard that I'm talking about got expensive, and where I learned the difference between courage and confidence. And these stories are going to sound very familiar to you, but humor me this. Listen a little bit deeper this time. I'm going to expand on it in a manner that is going to have more merit. I've done this so that the familiarity brings you in deeper. So let's recount that story again. That new client calls me. We've talked very infrequently. It was very odd for him to just blurt out that he's going to be sending me a new case, a new full mouth reconstruction. We all know full mouth cases are different. They don't just test your technique, they test your ability to communicate. And in that time, it was testing my leadership as well, because it tests your ability to be the bad guy early so nobody becomes that bad guy later on. That case arrives. Yes, it was a young patient. We prepped almost every tooth in the mouth. It was one of those cases where you can feel the energy in the box because of the stakes. We know what's at stake here. I open it up and look at the records, and I immediately see it. This incoming data is just nowhere near appropriate for the magnitude of what we're about to do. The bite looks horrible. The opposing impression was short on certain sides. The information that should be clear is soft. The notes are super minimal, and that kind of minimal just tells you the office was moving super fast on that appointment and didn't have the time to slow down and really think about what I needed to hear or have. And here's the uncomfortable truth about being good at this work. Guys, when you get better, you don't just see what's in front of you, you actually have the ability to see what's coming. You see that remake before it exists. You see that frustration before the phone call. You see the patient's disappointment before the insert appointment. And that ability to see is a gift and kind of burden as well, because now you have a choice. You can be quiet, try to make it work and hope, or you can speak up and risk being disliked. That's where the standards start costing something. If I push it through, I gamble with my name. I gamble with the patient's time. I gamble with the doctor's schedule. I gamble with my team because they're the ones that are going to feel the chaos when the case comes back. So I pick up the phone. I'm not calling to blame him. I'm not calling to shame him. I'm not calling to perform authority. I'm calling to protect the outcome. I say calmly, "Doctor, I need you to redo the records." And that horrible, uncomfortable silence is there for what seemed like an eternity. That silence where your own brain starts writing the horror stories, like he's going to blow up or he's going to hang up or I'm going to lose this client. And in that time, I couldn't afford to lose that client. This is the voice of the old season. But the standard is the voice of the new season. The standard says, if the inputs are wrong, the output will punish everybody. So I stay calm, I stay factual, I explain what I need, I explain why. I explain what happens if we skip it. I keep it simple. And he says, okay. He doesn't argue. He doesn't fight with me. He doesn't hang up the phone. He just says, thank you. Then he asks if I can come by the office and we can talk about what maybe better records look like. And I want you to hear this clearly, guys. That moment didn't happen because I was tough. It happened because I was honest. It happened because I wasn't trying to win a power struggle. I was trying to win this case. I went to the office. We sat down. We talked like adults. We looked at what I needed to win. We looked at what he needs to win. We talked about what is negotiable and what is not negotiable. We talked about the timeline and we talked about the patient. Before that meeting, it was a transaction. Doctor was sending a case. A lab is making the case. After that meeting, it was different. We were a partnership, a shared standard. He redid the records. The case moved forward. It still had difficulty because full mouth cases always do, but it somehow became a bit more predictable, became manageable, became that case we could lead instead of that case that leads us. And the funny part is this, the very thing I was afraid of, losing the client, became the very thing that created loyalty. Because he saw I wasn't just chasing his money, I was protecting the outcome. Guys, that's what standards do. Standards don't weaken trust. They strengthen it when you deliver without the blame game. And that case taught me something else too. It taught me that the phone is maybe my best dental instrument. The phone is where you control those variables. The phone is where you get to set alignment. The phone is where you stop resentment from being born. The phone, well, it becomes more than just a vendor. Because in this trade, you can be talented and still be very disposable. Town alone is pretty common, guys. I think standards are what make you rare. This is the one that most technicians that are listening to this are going to relate because they've all had these types of cases. Everyone's lived some version of this. Envision this. It's that case that shows up complete. It's that case that maybe the scan looks like, there's more holes to it than solid data. Case might come in with no opposing or no notes or just a simple saying of shade A2. And somehow, some way, you know that this patient's going to end up being that really high value aesthetic patient, and their shade choice is going to be super emotional. It's that case that comes in with urgency, and none of the information makes urgency really possible. You know, those first few years, I'm completely honest. I made those cases work. I pushed them through. I let the day define the standard. I told myself back in the day I was just being flexible. I told myself I was being helpful. But the truth is, I was just being afraid. I was just afraid of that phone call coming in. I was afraid of the confrontation that might happen. I was afraid of being seen as difficult. But most of all, I was afraid of losing business. And being afraid, guys, is the most expensive commodity. So here's what happens. You make it work. You guess. You compensate. You build something that looks maybe right on your bench, and you send it out. Then it comes back sometimes with a chip, sometimes with an open contact, sometimes with a high bite. Sometimes it comes back with the patient being so upset because the shade is off, even though the shade is a conversation that never happened. And guys, in those moments, everyone suddenly wants to talk about accountability. The doctor wants to talk about the lab wants to talk about the records, the assistants wants to talk about time, the patient wants to talk about their expectations. But the failure was born long before the remake. The failure was born in silence. There was a season where that started costing my team. You can feel it in the lab. People get quiet. The best tech stop smiling. People stop taking pride because the pride start feeling unsafe. Pride starts feeling like it's going to be punished somehow. You start seeing burnout, not because of the work is hard, but because the work is just crazy. It's chaotic. It has no balance. I think chaos is what breaks people, not the volume of it, just the chaos in it all. I remember one night looking at a stack of remakes. I'm looking at the hours. I'm looking at the money. I'm looking at the moral. I'm looking at the way the team is carrying themselves. The way maybe they're moving faster, but looking less alive. And I realized something that should have really been obvious. You know, we were paying for other people's science. We were paying for missing information. We were paying for the poor communication. We were paying for the fear. And the problem wasn't that the work was so flippin' hard. The problem was that the work was unpredictable. So I decided that season was over. That's when I started saying the hard thing early, calmly, without drama, without finger pointing. That's when I started enforcing those standards. Not because I wanted to be difficult, but because I wanted the work to be honorable. I wanted my team to feel safe. Because I wanted a client's relationship to be real, not just based on performance. I wanted the patient to win. And because I didn't want to build a life that looked so stressful from the outside, but feels super hollow on the inside. If episode 8 was a cost audit, this was my operational audit. This was me realizing that every quiet compromise was taxing me in such a harsh manner. And you can pay that tax once, or if you do nothing, guys, you can pay it forever. I think it's the standards are how you stop paying it forever. Okay, now let's maybe pull the lesson out of these case files. Because the point of me getting on this microphone is not just story time. The point is to kind of like maybe name a principle and give it some sort of practical meaning. Today's standards. A standard's not perfection. A standard is not rigidity. A standard is not just my opinion masquerading as some sort of authority. Standard is repeatability under pressure. A standard is the minimum you enforce so outcomes stop becoming a gamble. Standards exist to protect the patient, the clinician, the technician. Protect the team, but most of all, protect your business. Standards protect margins. Margins are time, money, capacity, remakes, morale, your reputation. Standards also protect the meaning of it all. Meaning is your life, your relationships, your health. Your ability to show up without being hollow. Your ability to love this trade without letting it consume you. There's also something else standard protects, and it's subtle. Guys, I think it protects the truth. Because in dentistry, the truth is often inconvenient. The truth slows you down. The truth forces a conversation. It forces your accountability. It forces true alignment. And if you avoid the truth early, you absolutely are going to pay for it later. But then you pay for it with emotion. I think the earlier truth is named, the cheaper it is. The later it's named, the more expensive it becomes. So this is what I mean when I say owning the case. Owning the case doesn't mean the doctor stops being the quarterback. Come on, guys, that's the reality. They are. Owning the case to me means that I'm not just catching the ball anymore. I'm helping call that play. It means I don't just build what was ordered. I build what makes sense. I build what I can survive with. I build what can be defended ethically. It means I take responsibility for what I control. I don't pretend I control what I don't control. It means my team has clarity. They don't have to guess what good is. They know the line. They know the line is real. They know I will back them up when the case arrives incomplete. Guys, that's leadership. And I'll say it again because this is where remakes are born. Silence is expensive. Silence is where resentment grows. Silence is where everybody pretends it's fine until it's not. If you want to be exceptional at this trade, you learn to love the early conversation. You learn to pick up the phone. You learn to say the hard things calmly. You learn to do it without finger pointing. You learn to do it with ownership. That's the standard. That's the standard in real life. Episode 9. I call it standard pre-flight. This is what runs before you press go. This is what runs before you say make it work. This is what runs before you gamble your name on someone else's incomplete information. First, confirm the inputs. Records are scanned, bind or posing, shade select and photograph if the case requires it. Notes that actually explain what the doctor wants and a timeline that is grounded in reality. Second, name the biggest variable, the one thing most likely to create failure. Name it privately first and then name it professionally. Third, say the risk early, calmly, without blame. The earlier the risk is named, the cheaper it is. The later it's named, the more emotional it becomes. Fourth, offer options. Redo the records. Improve the scan. Capture the damn opposing. Take proper photos. Adjust the plan. Maybe adjust the material selection. Adjust the timeline. Proceed with alignment. But most importantly, pause until the inputs are correct. Fifth, set the non-negotiable. That line doesn't move, my friends. This is the minimum you require to protect the outcome. 6, define success in a way that can be defended, not just the photo, not just the marketing, not just the function of it all, the comfort or the longevity, the patient's real life. 7th, document it. Document alignment like a professional, not like a threat, not a weapon. As clarity, as stewardship. This list takes a minute. It can save you hours. That minute saves days. That minute saves relationships. Now the phone call is where the standards become real. Here's the call. This is the structure I use. It's not fancy. It's really rather easy, guys. It's doctor, hey, I'm on your side. I want this outcome that you want. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's the risks. Here are the options. If we want predictable on this, I need this. Once I have that, I can move immediately. The call does not finger point. The call owns the case. The call protects the outcome. Being calm is not being soft. Being calm is being controlled. Being calm is not being passive. Being calm is being precise. It's easy to be calm when everything is going well. But guys, the standard shows up when someone is embarrassed, when someone is rushed, when someone is loud, when someone is defensive, when someone is stressed, when someone is trying to hand you chaos. That is where the standard becomes your signature, and your signature follows your work into rooms you will never enter. The expansion myth says growth is the reward. I think the reality says that growth is the test. The test isn't your skill, guys. It's maybe whether you can hold the line when clarity means more than comfort. The test is whether you can protect your team from chaos. The test is when you can say no to incomplete inputs. The test is whether you can be honest early so nobody has to get pissed off later. Standards are built in the furnace, but they're enforced in the reflection of it all. They're enforced in the conversations you stop avoiding. They are enforced when you choose facts over fear. They are enforced when you stop playing the blame game and start owning the case. That's why episode 9 exists. Because from here forward, this podcast changes a little bit. One story, one principle, one tool. Next episode, we're going to be starting to talk about records and what predictable outcomes actually require. After that, we're going to talk about the phone call framework and how to say the hard thing without burning that relationship down. After that, we're going to go ahead and move forward and talk about materials and why material choice isn't just a menu on a price list. I like to say it's a risk profile. Then we're going to go get into digital in a way that still respects the analog fundamentals that I love. We all know how powerful digital is, but it is tenfold when you have the analog wisdom behind it. The best technicians in this world know both. And eventually, I'm not going to be doing this podcast alone. I want to bring people into these conversations, people who carried their own weight, people that made their own mistakes, people who earned their own wisdom. Not to perform, just to share honestly like I have. If this show has value to, share it with one technician or one clinician or who still cares about doing things the right way. If you have de-identified the case that's causing the pain, send it in. I'll turn it into an episode, not to embarrass anybody, but to help the person maybe avoid the same mistake. Thank you so much for listening, guys. And this is John Wilson once again for Margins and Meaning. And until next time, I say thank you and take care.